Senator Milne.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. Well, as you well know, Mr Acting Deputy President, tonight there are parties going along in the corridors and around Parliament House as the government celebrates the fact that it has now got the numbers to repeal the only effective package of legislation we have which is bringing down emissions in Australia, which has successfully brought down emissions in the electricity sector by 11% over the last couple of years. And I want to say to the children of 2050, they knew, the people who voted for the repeal of the carbon price, the people who voted to abandon strong action on global warming knew full well what they were doing, and they chose to do it. Do not listen in the future when people try to argue they didn't know about the seriousness. They did, and they proactively chose to do it. Because we stand here in this parliament at a critical moment of time. It's critical because we, as a national parliament, are choosing our response to the climate emergency which we human beings have wrought on the planet, and it will impact on every generation who comes after us on a global scale. It's a critical moment because the rest of the world is watching to see whether Australia is going to take up a responsible position as a global citizen, or whether we are going to retreat and become a laggard, a global pariah in the family of nations. It's a critical moment because it's the moment when we decide as a nation whether to embrace the opportunities that the future offers, a society powered by 100% renewable energy, by the sun, the wind, the waves, the earth itself, or whether we remain captured by the vested interests of the old order, the old coal and gas industries, and remain tied to the last century. Because voting for the abolition of the clean energy package is voting for failure. It's failure to face up to the 4 to 6 degrees of warming that we are currently on a trajectory to reach. It's failure to do our fair share globally in the effort to try to constrain global warming to less than 2 degrees. It's failure to take up the opportunities, the jobs, the innovation in the green-powered future. But the greatest failure is that those who vote for the abolition of the clean energy bills are imposing on our children a harder life. We're imposing on our children a higher degree of anxiety about the world in which they live, and we are imposing on them a far less awesome planet than we have now. That is not leadership, Mr Acting Deputy President. It is intergenerational theft. The Prime Minister is engaged with every single member who votes for the abolition of these clean energy bills. The Prime Minister and all of those are engaging in intergenerational theft. But it's also the day when the Abbott government confirms what Machiavelli knew in the 16th century, when he said, "There is nothing more difficult to handle, more doubtful of success, more dangerous to carry through than an initiating change. The innovator makes enemies of all those who prosper under the old order, and only lukewarm support is forthcoming from those who would prosper under the new. Their support is lukewarm partly from fear of their adversaries who have the existing laws on their side, and partly because men are generally incredulous, never really trusting new things unless they have tested them by experience." Well, it's certainly true that the vested interests of the old order, Mr Acting Deputy President, have won this Pyrrhic victory. Because what we have here is the whole community will be paying with their lives, their farms, their futures, so that the big polluters can get off scot-free in Australia. And the vested interests of the old order who have fought like partisans include the coal miners, who want to dig coal out of the Bowen and Galilee basins. But the vested interests also include the Business Council of Australia, the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I have never witnessed in 25 years in politics such a dismal failure of the business community in Australia, and never will the business community be able to say to this parliament that politicians don't show leadership. The Greens have stood here showing leadership on the management of society and the economy at a time of a global emergency, and the business councils, the ACCIs, the Minerals Council of Australia have all said, forget it. We want to stick with the greed, the money, the last century. And I think at some point we will have a website of climate criminals, and I would have a few people to put on that list. And I would conclude for a start. Dick Warburton and Brian Fisher, David Murray, Maurice Newman, Mitch Hook, and so you could go on. Chris Mitchell, Gina Reinhardt, Innes Wilcox, Ian Plimer, Rupert Murdoch, George Pell, Andrew Bolt, John Roscombe, Martin Ferguson, and so on and so forth. Because those people in years to come will try to pretend that they didn't try to tear down the climate bills when they have, and the record will clearly show it. But the good news tonight is that this is the last stand of the vanquished. For all those people partying around the corridors, enjoy it, because it's your last stand. The fact is, you have misjudged the temperature. As Machiavelli said, the old order fight like partisans, the new order are lukewarm in their support. But I can tell you they are not lukewarm in their support on this occasion. The temperature is rising. You don't have to look around to find that people want Australia to lead on global warming. They want to embrace the future. They love renewable energy. They love innovation. They want the new jobs and investment. But the people who want those things don't have the megaphones and the echo chambers of the Murdoch press. They don't have the false balance of the mainstream media, which feels it has to give the same column mounts to the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change and to Ian Plimer as an equal, for example. But when we're looking at the temperature of the planet rising, let's look at the climate science. The fact of the matter is we are on track for 4 to 6 degrees of warming. That means people will not survive. Half of the world will be uninhabitable. There will be 1 million deaths a week for the next 90 years if it gets to 4 degrees. 3 degrees is deemed to be a tipping point from which the feedback loops make it impossible to actually stop. So now we've got a situation with the ice sheets melting. We've had research just last week about the warming waters around Antarctica, the changed situation meaning that those ice shelves are melting faster than anticipated in the recent UN Climate Panel report just released a few months ago. The same with the Arctic ice melt, progressing faster than first thought. We now have a situation where there is genuine concern about the 50 gigatonne reserve of methane stored in the form of hydrates that exist in the East Siberian Arctic shelf. That can either be released gradually or suddenly. But we've also got ocean acidification and warming. We've got the calcium-shelled creatures in our oceans unable to form new shells, a simplification of the food chain in the marine environment. We're seeing a loss of coral reefs around the world, and we're seeing more extreme weather events, more intense weather events. And the Greens have had the courage for a long time to call it as it is, Mr Acting Deputy President, and that is extreme weather events are made more intense by global warming, and we will not be silenced by all those, when the extreme weather events occur, who say, oh, you can't say that. You can't say it's to do with global warming. Well, it is. It is. And as people suffer heat waves and droughts and more extreme bushfires and storm surge and flooding, Let it be known that that is what people are voting in this Senate tonight to achieve. We are going to see not only that, but loss of food security around the world as crops are destroyed through drought, through fire, through flood. We are going to see conflict and disease. Dengue fever is already spreading further south in Australia than ever was expected. And we are seeing loss of species. How heartbreaking is it that a quarter to a third of all species would be extinct by 2050 if we stay on the trajectory we are on? That's what I mean when I talk about simplification and loss of the awesome wonder of our world. So the second thing about which global action is rising in terms of temperature is the willingness of the world to act, and that is something I really welcome. The fact that we now have got President Obama out there saying, yes, we must get a 2015 treaty. We have the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Mr Cameron, out there saying the same, the European Union. We have fact of the matter is that global emissions need to peak and come down, and it should have been in 2015. That's what the scientists said, peak and come down by 2015, but they've pushed that out because we've clearly missed that deadline. But the fact of the matter is, and this is where I want to get to the point about what needs to be done, it is not asking the question of is global warming real, it's about how fast we have to act on it and how deeply we have to cut. And that is my challenge to the Labor Party, the Liberal Party, the Palmer United Party. It's no good standing up saying you want an emissions trading scheme. An emissions trading scheme is a tool to deliver what? What is the target? How rapidly do you want to bring down emissions? We haven't heard a peep out of anyone except the Greens in this parliament about the level of ambition and the urgency that's required. And I can put it on the record here, Mr Acting Deputy President, that the Greens have a second reading amendment which says that we're on track for 4 degrees of warming. To put on the record that that means no new coal mines, no extension of existing coal mines, no new coal export terminals. And it says to adopt a trajectory of 40 to 60% below 2000 levels by 2030 and net carbon zero by 2050 in order to go into the negotiations on the 2015 treaty. I haven't heard from any other party, including those who claim to be leading on global warming, what is your level of ambition and how fast do you want to achieve it? And if you're not prepared to say what your cap is on an emissions trading scheme, then it is empty words. Empty words. There is such a thing as being too late to address global warming, and as I said, this is a critical moment for Australia. It is a fact, as Tim Wirth, who was a former Clinton Secretary of State, said, the economy is a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment. And that is why the opportunity is now before us. We need transformation, a wave of social, technical and economic innovation that will touch every person, community, institution and nation on earth. The irony is that this transformation is still viewed as an economic cost when it is in fact an enormous economic opportunity, an opportunity that we are now being increasingly forced to recognise, and the Greens do. And I want to say that Australia is in the right place at the right time in our history, and we should not be squandering this opportunity. We should be saying to the global community that we have a vision for this country to be powered by 100% renewable energy, to be out there chasing more efficient homes, more walkable cities, more public transport, more, and some in Australia at any rate, of high-speed rail, for example. We want sustainable food systems. We do not want coal seam gas ripping up our farmlands. We do not want to lose our agricultural lands. We want to make sure we keep them so that they can produce food into the future. But we want to look after our biodiversity as well. We want to protect our forests and our wetlands because they are wonderful homes and habitat to other species, but they're also fantastic carbon sinks. We want to have solar thermal in this country. We, the Greens, managed to achieve the Australian Renewable Energy Agency and the Clean Energy Finance Corporation in our negotiations in the clean energy package, and we will fight to secure and keep the money for those organisations and keep them strong, because we want to see all of these technologies rolled out in Australia because they bring jobs, they bring innovation, and they are developing renewable energy. And at that point we can celebrate, Mr Acting Deputy President. I said before, it's the last stand of the vanquished, because the renewable energy sector has won. The future is with us. We can have the Abbott government stand up in the middle of the road and try and hold up the future. They can try and do that. They can actually line the pockets of the coal billionaires. They can do all of those things, but they can't stop the future. We have got solar already achieving grid parity in many countries around the world, and here in Australia we've got this massive rearguard effort from the old coal-fired generators trying to knock out solar. But it's too late. People power has won. More than 1 million homes across Australia have got solar panels on their roofs, and everywhere I go, people are excited about the new technologies that have been developed in Australia by the CSIRO, by other organisations. And I can tell you that the pilot project of supercritical steam, that was a combination of CSIRO and ARENA, would power a turbine from solar thermal heat instead of burning coal. The inventors proudly compared it to breaking the sound barrier, and yet the Abbott government slashes the funding for it. If ever there was a symbol of choosing the past and not the future, it is that particular decision. But, Mr Acting Deputy President, the Australian Greens stand for not only a safe climate, not only ambitious targets on global action and a treaty in 2015, but we want to invest in our young people, in our universities, in education and training, in new technology, in research and development. That's where the excitement is, and that's what we need to protect our environment. As it stands, the Abbott government is going to leave us exposed to non-trade tariff barriers. If you think the rest of the world is going to put up with Australia behaving as a pariah, have another think. The Koreans will put a tax on coal imports. The Indians have already done it, and that will be something that continues. We will end up with stranded assets all over the place as people divest from the old coal past, and especially as people come to realise that all of these companies that are the old coal companies only have their asset value because it is assumed they can mine their asset, their resource, and the world is saying, no, you can't. Your asset value is about to go up in smoke. It is the carbon bubble, literally, that will be occurring. But the Greens will choose the future. We are going to choose life for the planet, for our oceans, for our species, for our precious places like the Great Barrier Reef and Ningaloo. We are going to choose life for people who live on Tuvalu, on Kiribati, in Bangladesh. And we are going to choose hope for the young people, the future generations who come after us. And we are saying to them, yes, no wonder you feel anxious and depressed by the complete lack of leadership, by the greed and self-interest of the old order, by the fact that we have a coal billionaire leading a political party in this place voting to put money into his own companies. That is our reality. We're seeing in Tasmania, Hydro Tasmania, going to lose. It's going to end up with 1/10 of its profits as a result of taking away the carbon price, and 100 jobs lost in Tasmania by a decision to abandon carbon pricing. It is a huge cost to the future around the country. But the great news here is that we have won. We may lose this vote tonight and we may lose this version of carbon pricing, but we will be back, Mr Acting Deputy President. We will be back stronger and even more determined than we are now to make sure Australia does rise to the challenge. We will pursue 100% renewable energy for Australia. And I want to finish by saying only in the darkness can you see the stars, and that was Martin Luther King. And I want to say that we can see the stars and the sun through the coal mess of the Abbott government, and we will pursue those dreams, not just for ourselves, but for everyone out there at the moment who is uncertain. Take heart. Take heart, because whilst we live in a country governed by a Prime Minister who is a climate denier, the Greens are here to campaign for very strong action on global warming.
Thank you.